first time farmers using a compost product, they'll go, oh, this is amazing. It's, I haven't been using this for years. What they're actually tapping with that compost is all the fertiliser and nutrient they've put on the soil for decades beforehand.
I think the advantage of composting in general is that the microbes are there to do the work. We just need to provide them with the right environment. Everything that's being made here is going back into our circular economy. And effectively, I think we're the only recycled material that can say that.
You're taking grain or cereal waste, you're composting it and returning it back to a farmer who's then going to grow the next crop of oats or wheat. So that circular economy piece is really important.
G'day, I'm Craig Allen, and you're listening to the Healthy Soils podcast, a series about compost and how it can help create healthy soils that then grow the food we eat in Australia. The purpose of this podcast series is to help make the connection between organic waste generation and food production, and to inspire you to think about what you can do when it comes to organic waste, including food waste and compost. On this journey, we'll be talking with farmers, composters, and soil experts about the role we can all play in getting organic waste out of landfill and instead turned into compost. Because healthy soils produce healthy crops, which lead to healthy humans and animals. In this episode, we're looking at compost. What is it exactly? Where does it come from? And what are compost manufacturers doing to close the organic waste loop? When we say the word compost, you may think about piles of old leaves, chook poo, or organic waste, usually sitting in the corner of the backyard. But when we're talking about commercial compost, we're talking about tons of it, made up of organic waste from households, businesses, and farms. So let's define what we're talking about. Compost is an organic material that has been carefully processed with heat and oxygen to kill harmful microbes, reduce toxic compounds, so that it reaches a mature, safe state for use. And mature compost is the key point here. Mature compost won't hurt crops or pastures. We first meet Lachlan Jefferies, who runs an organic recycling company in South Australia that produces premium compost, soil and mulch. He's a fourth-generation soil producer and is passionate about the power of compost.
Our facility has around 180,000 tonnes of recyclable organic material go through it each year, and then that equates to over 250,000 cubic metres of compost, soil, mulch and product that leaves each year. Our product goes all over southeastern Australia, and we're very fortunate with a lot of wine districts, but horticulture, and right here where we are, we're right on the Northern Adelaide Plains, which is an intensive vegetable farming, and then obviously back into the urban Adelaide's landscape market as well. In an urban society, which most of us are in Australia, we get a lot of garden vegetation. So most households, or many households in built-up cities now, have multiple bins, and they'll have what we call a green bin. The main feedstock is food and garden, but it's predominantly garden. A number of councils across Australia now provide different mechanisms to try and encourage householders and residents to get the food from going into the general waste bin. We're really focused on urban organics, so our main feedstock is FOGO green bins from residents in Adelaide and the outer sort of metro areas, as well as commercial organic streams, and that's not just food. So we do get food from restaurants and supermarkets, but we might get paper towel from office blocks that are mixing their food in there, and also from food processing that happens in the sort of greater Adelaide area. So it comes in, most of that material is source separated, so we're passionate about a source separated system. The better we can separate materials at the start, then the high end use we can get it, whereas if it's all mixed in, it gets very hard for us to separate. We will keep certain products separate and blend others together. The material comes pretty well straight into what we call a forced aeration process. So you could mow your lawn on the weekend, and by Tuesday it's in a composting pile. When you see the massive piles that we have, they're over 55 to 60 degrees within 24 hours. So that's from the microbes and the bugs and everything like that getting into it and loving that diversity and doing their work. Some people sort of highlight to me that in community we don't get a reward for doing it. We don't get a punishment if we don't do it. But it just highlights how passionate people are about playing their role in a circular economy and moving to a more sustainable future. The beauty of an urban organics material is the diversity of plant materials. So that diversity is just bringing life into soil. We're out here on the Northern Adelaide Plains. It's the largest intensive vegetable growing area in the Southern Hemisphere. And first time farmers using a compost product, they'll go, oh, this is amazing. It's, I haven't been using this for years. What they're actually tapping with that compost is all the fertiliser and nutrient they've put on the soil for decades beforehand. I think the biggest and best thing that we're learning about applying compost from a soil health perspective is diversity, and that diversity helps me to have a healthier soil, less issues with pests and disease, and my soil's able to uptake the nutrients that I put to make sure I get the healthiest produce. And I'm not a specialist, but agronomists will sort of tell you that they're more available in a compost form than maybe in a chemical form that I'm applying it. And because they're blended in the compost, again, just helps the soil life, the soil food web access, and make that available to plants as well. And it's really important that the compost is just part of a holistic system. It's not the silver bullet. And also soil health is a long-term strategy. It's not like one application. A healthy soil obviously supports plant and the production of whatever crop the farmer's providing, but a healthy soil will also deal with some of the extreme conditions that we have in our environment now, whether that's heat waves, floods and drought. So the healthier the soil, the more resilient a farmer's crop's going to be. Most good growers are working with agronomists and other advisors and supporting a holistic system, and there's nothing like the farmer's presence to improve soil health. So they're walking the crops, observing how it changes, and not just day by day, but season by season.
From the vegetable growers in South Australia, we go across to Western Australia, where Greg Watts runs Seawise, a business that values organic carbon. Their ethos is based in managing soils with the goal of maintaining and improving soil organic carbon. So, why is this important? Well, improving soil carbon storage can help reduce Australia's greenhouse gas emissions, and it can also help increase the living and decomposing organic matter in soil. Greg tells us about how they create compost.
We have a couple of different production lines at Seawise. We like to name our compost production lines based upon where the ingredients come from and where we intend the products to go. So if we were to look at our garden line, that's traditionally made from community-sourced green waste, and we blend that with community-based liquids such as grease trap or brewery sludges or other things, so that we get the right carbon-nitrogen ratio and the right moisture levels for our compost. We then have a second production line called our farm line, which is where we utilise ingredients such as eco-shelter from the piggery that's next door to our facility, or possibly other manures, and we use a lot of cereal waste and straw in that line. Both of those lines provide different levels of maturity from a compost perspective, but they also provide a different nutrient profile depending on the market where we're hoping to get into. What we hope to achieve is that with the market for the finished product in mind, we come backwards through our composting process and actively source ingredients that will provide the goodies, as we like to call them, for that market. So, for instance, if we were producing a compost for, say, a canola farm, we'd chase some byproducts that were high in sulphur, so maybe some gypsum or some other products like that, so that the sulphur would go through the composting process and finish up in the finished product, ready for the customer. We push compost into a broadacre market, and we're getting really good results by being able to assist the farmers meet the crop's nutritional requirements by using compost alongside traditional fertiliser. If we can improve the soil carbon by introducing the compost, then we know that that will provide better nutrient use efficiency and increase the water holding capacity of the soils, which in Western Australia is pretty important to utilise every drop that we get. We recognise the challenges that these farmers are already facing. We also recognise they've had 40 to 50 years of synthetic fertilisers, which solved a lot of those crop nutritional issues and are very scientifically based around when to apply the nitrogen and the phosphorus and all that sort of stuff. But I think as we've seen the soil carbon levels in Western Australia's wheat belt, decrease to about 0.7%. And we need to remember that at 0.5, you're effectively farming a desert or desertification. The amounts of compost that we apply prior to the seeder going through, it actually just gives just that enough carbon to excite the soil microbiology. And the most important thing we can do there is to actually turn those nutrients that have come from the wheat belt around, turn the carbon that's come from the wheat belt around, and send it back to the wheat belt where it's needed to grow the next round. Put the carbon back to the start of the cycle and let's go again with it. It's always in a transient state, whether you're eating it or putting it into a farm, the carbon's still there. Yeah, and the best thing about some of our feedstocks is if I look at waste grain, for instance, it actually creates that circular economy story. So you're taking grain or cereal waste, you're composting it and returning it back to a farmer who's then going to grow the next crop of oats or wheat. So that circular economy piece is really important. And so when I talk about what's special about our compost is that we're aiming for a carbon percentage upwards of 40%. So the more organic carbon we can have in our compost, the better off we are.
So we know that compost is made from organic waste and that it can significantly improve the soils to which it is applied. It's also vital to improving soil carbon levels. We heard from Greg over in Western Australia that it can help transform soil that's basically desert into soil that has a carbon percentage of 40% or more, and that's because of compost. We now move from the wheat fields of Western Australia to New South Wales. Duncan is from SoilCo, and for over 40 years they've been designing, building and operating innovative organics recycling facilities. They create 98,000 tonnes of compost and mulch each year, bringing life to soils across 5 processing facilities. Duncan explains there are 2 different composting systems, in-vessel composting and the traditional windrow style of manufacture.
They're 2 very different techniques of compost manufacture. The more traditional style would be the open windrow. So our Waggamaya facility at Nowra in New South Wales has a licensed capacity of 78,000 tonnes to accept both garden organics and FOGO materials, which is food and garden organics combined together in our curbside collection bins. So the FOGO is an initiative of New South Wales EPA to divert food waste from landfill. Our mums and dads and families can put their food waste in with the green waste and have it collected on a weekly or fortnightly basis. That then comes to one of the SoilCo facilities where we're able to manufacture that through into the compost. So that facility uses what's called an aerated static pile to assist in the pasteurisation, and then it moves through into windrows where we turn it mechanically to achieve the maturity that we're looking for before we sell the compost. The in-vessel composting technology that we use enables that food waste to be contained within an environmentally responsible facility, whereby effectively we're managing any odours or other issues within the confines of effectively a big concrete oven. So the advantages of it are that we have full control over the composting process. We can add the amount of water that we need to add, we can add the amount of air that we need to add, and we're actually able to get the material to a point of stability in a shorter time frame than what we would do in the open windrow composting, where it unfortunately is exposed to the elements. The forced aeration allows us to dial up the oxygenation when required to achieve what's known as pasteurisation or hygienisation, whereby the bacterial population grows prolifically and creates enough heat to ensure that we are killing any weed seeds, diseases or pathogens. And then we're able to dial that oxygen back down so we go back into more of a composting or decomposition phase. In the in-vessel composting, it comes out after its period of time in the tunnels, and then goes direct to screening and quality assurance, and then is dispatched to market. The quicker that we can turn our compost around from a raw material to a finished product is an opportunity for the business and for our resident to provide us with more material. The stability side of things is all about creating fit-for-purpose products that we can then sell back into the various markets such as urban amenity or agriculture. We're finding that that's a real advantage. And because that's predominantly got the food material in it, or the FOGO that we discussed earlier, those nutrient levels are actually now starting to become very similar to chicken manure. And chicken manure was the traditional organic amendment for soils on the South Coast. And what we're seeing is that some of our customers are starting to compare the compost with chicken manure and use it in its place. We've been manufacturing compost-based garden mixes and lawn top dressings, potting mixes and planter box mixes for in excess of 20 years. And those materials are sold back to the mums and dads of the world, to landscape contractors, to councils. However, we do have some agricultural opportunities, and we do see some of our compost going, for example, to local dairy farms on the South Coast as well. The thing we're starting to realise, particularly with the in-vessel compost material, is that it's a very even consistency in both moisture content, nutrient content, and we can turn the same quality of product out basically every week of the year. And I think the advantage of composting in general is that the microbes are there to do the work. There's not a lot of complexity with it. We just need to provide them with the right environment, and ensuring that they've got adequate food, moisture and oxygen is enough for the process to start.
So Duncan, Lachlan and Greg approach compost differently, but what they do have in common is a love for microbe-rich compost that is rich in soil carbon and oxygen. You may be listening and wondering what the process is for making compost and whether you can create your own on a smaller scale, especially if you don't have a lot of land or are located a far distance from the nearest processing facility. Well, you may be interested to learn that there have been innovations in compost technology, innovations that are helping make compost manufacturing more accessible to more farmers. Greg Wise in WA explains how they use a mobile aerated floor, or MAF system, and how it all works.
For our composting system itself, we use a MAF system. So that's a mobile aerated floor. What I like about it is that it's a very space and energy efficient composting system. And the mobile is really important to me. The best thing about the mobile aerating floor that we find is that when you come to move that compost, or when you come to flip it or turn it or anything like that, you can actually remove all of your infrastructure and you're just operating straight onto a flat bit of hard stand again. So the potential for equipment damage is minimised by the fact that you remove it from the pile. The first part of composting is blending of our dry ingredients. We then very carefully bring the pile of dry ingredients up to our required moisture level, which is somewhere above 50 to 55% moisture. From there, we have a short duration of what we call preheating. So that's where the bugs really start to work and start generating some heat. And once we see some good heat in the pile, so say 40 or 50 degrees, we then move it onto stage 1 and we put that onto MAF, or onto air, forced aeration, for 2 weeks. After that 2 weeks, we roll that product onto stage 2. Now, the important bit about flipping it is that in your pasteurisation process, you want to get all of that because we use some of our ingredients are what are termed high-risk ingredients, we need to pasteurize, which is 15 days above 55 degrees Celsius. And pasteurization causes the destruction of all the weed seeds and potential pathogens through heat. And so the reason we then roll that onto stage 2 is we effectively put the outside on the inside and the inside on the outside. So all of that material gets exposed to the higher temperatures above 55 degrees in the middle of the composting pile. What we start to see here is we start to see the carbon transform from what was, dry, sharp, non-wetting sort material, like you typically see sawdust or something like that. And it actually starts to become a bit softer, a bit more like a sponge. After 8 weeks of composting, we're ready to turn that pile over into a maturation pile and mature a little bit further before we go through our last stage, which is a screening stage, which is where we do the particle size separation, where we make the difference between what would be a mulch and a soil conditioner, which for sea-wise is about 16 millimetres. So if it's smaller than 16 millimetres, it becomes a soil conditioner. And once we get it screened and it's sitting in a stockpile, then it's ready for sale. To increase the production of our facility, we worked out that we'd need 4 times the amount of hard stand. So instead of having 4 hectares of bitumen, we'd need 16 hectares of bitumen. And the cost was just something that the business couldn't sustain. So our owners went on a worldwide search looking for their next compost technology, and that's where we found MAF. And so with our mobile aerating floor, we're actually producing 4 times the compost that we used to produce using our turner on the same size hard stand that we had 15 years ago. But more importantly, we're not using 95 litres of diesel an hour to keep the turner running. But the ultimate win for us was around processing times. So by using forced aeration, we were able to reduce the processing time of our most mature compost. We were able to reduce the processing time of that compost from 32 weeks to 16 weeks. And the secret is in the aeration.
It's amazing to see how far composting has come. Where once companies like Greg's were burning 95 litres of diesel fuel every hour to keep their turner running, and that processing time can be cut from 32 weeks down to 16. Not only are they creating compost for healthy soils, but reducing fossil fuel use at the same time. I'll leave the last word to Duncan from New South Wales, who explains how compost plays an important part in the circular economy.
I don't think that the garden organics or the composting industry gets credit for the fact that over the last 20 years, the diversion of garden organics from landfill to compost has actually, of all the recycled materials, has been maintained for reuse within our own economies. There's no export of compost or export of green waste from Australia. Everything that's being made here is going back into our own circular economy. And effectively, I think we're the only recycled material that can say that.
Thanks for listening to the Healthy Soils podcast, a series about the wonders of compost. Be sure to subscribe or follow our show so you don't miss out on future episodes when we get down and dirty into compost and how it's changing our soils for the better. You can find more information about what we discussed in the show notes, or you can go to the website to find out more. I've been Craig Allen. See you next time.